Hey, what's going on, everyone? So last week I did a live for the first time in the kitchen. Usually don't do stuff in the kitchen, on how I made very powerful cold brew coffee that's organic and also has pretty much no or very minimal microplastics. And what other thing did I kind of cover? And also the inexpensive cost of making very high quality coffee at home versus going out and drinking coffee, etc., etc. So today, what I wanted to do, I got my notes here just so I remember everything. What I wanted to do also is cover how to make very healthy, quote unquote healthy, I'll define kind of like what I mean by healthy, desserts. As you guys know, a lot of people eat desserts as well. And oftentimes people think like desserts just have to be like ice cream, cheesecake or cake or some type of like very heavily processed food oftentimes. And that's the only stuff that tastes good, you know what I mean? And oftentimes it's used for celebration too, you know, like cakes, etc., etc. But what I'm going to show you guys here is how to make very gut-friendly and actually just overall very healthy desserts that are like pretty inexpensive overall and like organic and have very minimal to no synthetic pesticides or herbicides, fungicides. It's tough to avoid all microplastics, but there's like very minimal microplastics as well in this as well. So basically the topic today is healthy desserts, how to make them, and et cetera, et cetera. But before I begin, it's important to kind of like understand with any kind of health principles that healthy is very vague. It's like, what does healthy mean? There are no absolutes. And you guys have to be very careful with listening to like even very credible people online, which is very tough to run into because at the end of the day, they never met you personally. And a lot of time, like sometimes with health advice, whether it be mental or physical or any kind of advice, if they don't know like your particular situation or your particular goals or your particular medical history, etc., etc., it's like, it's pretty impossible to give exact advice and say like, this is healthy for you. You know what I mean? Especially with like digestive health, everyone has a different ratio of keystone species or digestive history. Some people have current symptoms. You know, like 40 to 50% of Americans suffer from chronic digestive issues like their whole life, et cetera, et cetera. And all these things are very important to take into consideration because if you're kind of taking advice from people online that never met you, it's the equivalent of like, you know, showing up to a doctor's office and they don't even literally talk to you. They just are like, here, take this medication. And that would be kind of weird, right? But it's the same exact thing with taking advice from people online that don't know your particular situation. So always get an assessment from ideally a very competent and caring health provider that spends a decent amount of time with you. Like typically, you know, with chronic health issues, it's different. You know, you have a paper cut. Of course, it's not going to take a long time to assess that paper cut and give you maybe some spray and a Band-Aid. But with chronic health issues that are kind of persistent, depression, anxiety, IBS, SIBO, high blood pressure, high triglycerides, random cardiovascular issues, maybe low testosterone, et cetera, these are most often, like literally 99% of the time, issue of the living, you know, people making poor lifestyle and nutritional choices. Sometimes unknowingly, sometimes they do have the information to do the right thing, but have like a gargantuous amount of self-sabotaging behavior. So that needs to be addressed if that's the case as well. But it's critically important to always meet the problem at the level of the problem. So what I'm going to show today is like what I do personally for very healthy snacks that are great for your metabolic health, that keep you very full. They're great for skin quality as well, and great for your digestion, especially keeping you very regular, because no one really likes being constipated. It makes you feel kind of like overweight, and then it's like very heavy, et cetera, Gil, what's going on? And stuff of that sort. So Chronic gut issues. Gut issues are so common in American culture. Metabolic issues are common in American culture. Mental health issues are common in American culture. 50% of Americans right now are on 3 or more medical drugs, with 80% on a medical drug at any given time during any year, which is super crazy if you think about it. And a lot of times people with chronic digestive issues don't understand it's kind of like an issue of the living, you know what I mean? Like if you look up hunter and gatherers, which don't have a nutritionist, they don't have like a medical doctor, they don't have the internet, but it's extremely rare to run into gut issues in these tribal societies. It's like almost non-existent unless it's like some bacterial infection from maybe like a contaminated fish or animal or something of that sort, but they're not struggling with these chronic digestive issues like Americans are. And even with skin issues, a lot of times with like the teenage years, a lot of people are like, well, you get a lot of pimples or acne on your back or your face or your neck or whatever, or your chest during the teenage years because of hormones. But again, with these tribal societies, it's very rare to run into a teenager that has pimples and acne. Extremely rare. It's almost non-existent, okay? So just remember, there's of course more to optimizing your health than your diet, but your diet plays a huge part in it because everything about you, including your brain, is made out of food. So obviously, if you're eating, the wrong type of food, that's going to reflect in your appearance, in your energy levels, in your health, etc., okay? So another thing to consider is your gut. It has like a whole bunch of these like keystone species. It's basically bacteria. And there are like a bunch of them. And the problem with industrial agriculture is inevitably you could diversify it, but if you're not careful, it's very easy to kind of have a low diversity of food groups and you're kind of eating the same handful of food items every day. You know what I mean? And even if they're very healthy items, when you just selectively eat, just a handful, 5, 6 different items, you're overfeeding a certain keystone species and underfeeding or starving out another keystone species. And depending on which one you're overfeeding and which one you're underfeeding, it creates various digestive issues, okay? So that's important to consider. But I'm going to give you strategies of how to overcome this, even in modern industrial agriculture. It's quite easy. It's not too challenging once you kind of understand it. But it's important to keep this in mind, that a healthy digestive system has healthy keystone species and a healthy ratio of these species as well. If you're uncertain about how well your keystone species are doing, you can get a stool test for like a Biome-FX stool test or GI map test. And typically these tests are shipped to your house. I'm not getting any kickbacks here. These tests are shipped to your house and you kind of poop in a little sample, then you ship it out to a lab, usually via FedEx, and then you get your results, like a week later or 2 weeks later. And typically you would read it over with a registered dietitian and, take corrective action if there action needs to be taken. But it's very common for, especially people in America, to have, bacterial overgrowth, fungal overgrowth, or parasite overgrowth. And on top of that, like a funky ratio of a lot of these keystone species. So super cool test. I would recommend you do it, especially if you're struggling with chronic digestive issues. So now, in terms of healthy snacks, there are 3 variables that I look for. And I mainly categorize these snacks in terms of how well I feed these keystone species. So in order to keep these keystone species very healthy and thus keep your gut resilient and very healthy as well, you need like a few things. So first and foremost, you need the right quantity of fiber, which a lot of Americans don't get, So like the average American gets probably, 10 to 15 grams of fiber per day, where I read some reports where the average hunter-gatherer gets around maybe 120, 150 to 180 grams of fiber per day. So this is a huge discrepancy. And obviously, if you're getting in such a small amount of fiber, and typically combined with a gargantuous amount of processed food, which feed all the wrong bacteria, you start developing a lot of digestive issues. And a lot of times, a doctor would say like you need more fiber, but oftentimes people just correlate fiber with eating vegetables. You could get fiber from vegetables. They are actually a very good source of fiber. But the issue is like a lot of people don't like vegetables. They don't taste that good. If you juice vegetables, you get rid of all the fiber, so you got to keep that in mind. And a lot of people don't know different other sources of fiber, so they kind of just give up on it. And I also don't like eating, too many vegetables. I do eat them occasionally, typically in kind of like an elk soup I make once a week or twice a week sometimes. I rarely eat them raw, and I usually kind of just stick to like a variety of carrots or mushrooms or bell peppers or things of that sort. I typically would also buy like a frozen bag of mixed, broccoli, cauliflower. They have some carrots, some onions in there as well. I usually buy it frozen all the time as well. So that way you don't have to feel very rushed to eat it. And if you're kind of cooking it in a soup, it makes it easy because it's already processed out for you. But a lot of people don't like, my point being is that's an easy way to eat vegetables, even if you don't like them, because the broth kind of soaks into the vegetables and it makes them a lot more tolerable and easy to eat because they're very soft too in the broth instead of very crunchy. But just know that you don't really need vegetables to feed these keystone species. You can get fiber from a gargantuous amount of sources, like any fruit. People like fruit a lot more. Chia seeds, flax seeds, beans, different types of grains, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of different sources, and I'm going to cover a lot of those sources today too. I got some stuff laid out here, and I'm actually going to make the snack right in front of you guys, so that way you know how to make it yourself as well. But the point being is you want the right quantity. So usually the general recommendation is like 20-25 grams or so per 1,000 calories they eat per day. So if a person, let's say, typically is eating like 2,000 calories, you're going to need 40 to 50 grams, 60 to 80 is a good ballpark, but then again, some people recommend even more, like 80 to 100 in terms of quantity of fiber. But remember, you guys, quantity isn't the only thing to focus on. You also need diversity, because if you're getting a gargantuous amount of quantity from just one source, you're again overfeeding a certain keystone species, and then also underfeeding or possibly starving out other keystone species. Thus you create like an imbalance and you create digestive issues over time because of that. So you need a decent amount of diversity. And this snack that I'm going to show you here is an easy way to enhance that diversity a tremendous amount. The general rule is you want about 30 to 40 different sources of fiber per week. And if you want to go a step above and beyond, ideally have it seasonal too. So kind of maybe do some research on what's in season for your particular area, and then just try to stick to those categories of food. But again, you want the right quantity, about 60, maybe 60 to 80 grams. And then you want the right diversity too. You don't want to just be eating 60 to 80 grams of fiber from a single source, which will create issues long-term as well. So you want, in terms of diversity, 30 to 40 different sources of fiber per week, not per day. And these quantities of different sources don't have to be gargantuous. Sometimes it can be very minute, and that's good enough as well. So that's important to remember too. And then you guys remember, the sourcing is important as well, So you ideally don't want to be, sourcing crops that are sprayed with a gargantuous amount of synthetic pesticides. Remember, like on my other lives, I mentioned there's no safety testing required for complete formulations of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, rodenticides, et cetera, in the US that is being directly sprayed in large quantities on your food, and then you eat it. You can go to pubmed.gov and just research, the detrimental impact of a lot of these different biocides on the digestive system. Because remember, all these different chemicals are made to kill living organisms. Last time I checked, humans are a living organism as well. And you got a bunch of different living organisms in your gut that are very hypersensitive to a lot of these chemicals. Just go to pubmed.gov, look up a lot of these biocides and their impact on your digestive health. Another thing you can check out is the negative impact of chronic medical drug use on your digestive health. I've even found studies that showed antidepressants have a similar impact on your digestive system as broad spectrum antibiotics. And the thing with antibiotics is people use it for like a week or two, you know what I mean? And that still has a negative impact on a lot of people's digestion. But people get on antidepressants and they're on full blast on like 5, 10, 15, 20 years without taking a break at all. And you can imagine just the tremendous amount of damage done to their digestive health. And the irony is, mental health issues, you know, it's oftentimes correlated with digestive issues because, of course, there's an issue in the thinking and emotional dimension as well that needs to be considered. There's obviously an issue in their biology. They typically have very sick biology, etc. Their environment. There are many variables. I'm not saying this is just the only thing is the gut issues, but you have to remember a lot of, like 90% of your serotonin, a lot of your neurotransmitters are made in your gut. So if you have gut dysbiosis and serious digestive issues, it's going to have a negative impact on your mental health. Also from the vantage point of like, remember, when you have like actual physical pain, it fixates your attention to the degree of that pain. So it's very hard to enjoy or focus on anything else in life. So let's say, you know, you really hurt your back and it's like a 9 out of 10, you know what I mean? All of a sudden, like 90% of your total conscious energy is focused on like, man, my back is really hurting. You know what I mean? You can't be quite focused on work and, you know, like maybe going out or stuff of this sort without being constantly distracted. So it kind of fixates your attention, and it's kind of important to take that in consideration because always chronic health issues, chronic pain always have a negative impact on a person's psychology long term, because at a certain point they begin to kind of like lose hope. And especially if they're more inclined to kind of depressive thoughts, they typically over catastrophize. So they make it overly broad general, like, yes, my back hurts or my gut is hurting, but now like my whole life is falling apart. And then worse too is they make it very permanent also. So they're like, this isn't just an episode, this is going to be for the rest of my life all the time, which makes the person even more depressed and anxious, et cetera, and less likely to take the correct action to become healthy. So those are the three things I look for. It's like, you know, fiber, is the diversity there, and also how's the sourcing, because I don't want a gargantuous amount of pesticides being sprayed on my food. Especially, you know, you're eating 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 calories of that food a day. So the bioaccumulation of that toxicity is quite high. You know, the average newborn born in a metropolitan area these days is probably born with trace amounts of 120 different industrial and agricultural chemicals in their bloodstream already. And 50% of Americans develop cancer in their lifetime, and half of them die from it. You know, so 1 out of every 4 Americans typically dies from cancer, which is pretty serious. So, okay. So what you need here for this dessert option, I just collect these. I have so many of these glass bottles. Ideally, I like to always do glass as much as I can, okay? Just to reduce, again, those microplastics, because those microplastics do have a negative impact on your health. Some people are more sensitive to it than others, but also they typically could possibly, you know, contribute to further plaque buildup in your arteries, like near your heart, and then cause some cardiovascular complications as well. So you're going to need that. I have a few different options here. So here, as you guys see, I have usually buy like a mixed bag of different seeds, nuts, almonds, walnuts, whatever, etc., etc. The more diversity, the better. Like in here, I also buy the ones, just because it's dessert, I buy the ones with like the little chocolate chips. I really like those. And just in here alone, we have 5 different sources of fiber, you know, so that's already 5, you know, that easy. And the quantity, I don't know the exact quantity here, but probably in this little sample, you probably have, you know, like 3 grams, 4 grams, etc., etc. But this is just the base. And so what I'll do is pour it into the base, and I like to layer it, okay? So I have locally grown honey here. And the cool thing with honey, guys, is especially if you have seasonal allergies, just make sure it's an actual legit locally grown honey. if you get one because they're pollinating on, you know, the bees are going to different flowers, etc., and bring it back to the honey, it can help you with seasonal allergies as well. But I mainly just do it for the taste. And I'll just pour a little bit into the base here because I like to layer it, right? So I'm not done quite yet. So check this out. Another thing I like to throw in there is dragon fruit. And I always try to buy organic. Okay, dragon fruit is great. Obviously, like very healthy nutrients. But also dragon fruit helps you be a lot more regular as well. And again, you can kind of customize this. Just pick what you enjoy eating and what makes you feel good. But at the same time, try to make sure it's healthy as well. So I poured these guys in here. And I kind of mix it up a little bit. And then here, I love raspberries. So right here, guys, boom, organic as well. So the cool thing about raspberries too, and blackberries, is they're extremely high in fiber. So 1 cup of these guys has like 8 grams of fiber. And it's so tasty and it's so soft, it's easy to get that quantity in. Unlike, you know, chewing on vegetables all day, for 8 grams of fiber, you might need to eat, you know, 2 or 3 cups of vegetables, which is quite a bit. But this stuff you can eat very, very easily. So I'm going to open this up here. And, oh. Let's see. All right. Okay, it's not opening for the video, but let me see. Let me go get a quick knife really quick. Okay, so I'm going to go over here, cut this up a little bit, boom, boom, there we go. And then I'll just pour a little bit in there. There we go. So you can see it's kind of already filling up. There we go. And then maybe just do a little bit more honey. Okay, and then the other things I'm going to throw away just a sprinkle of is we got like flax seeds. Okay, organic. And we also have chia seeds. The chia seeds too, one thing you could do is buy mixed chia seeds. They sometimes have like 2 or 3 different varieties. And again, that lets you hit that diversity quota easily. And then also it's very rich in fiber as well, okay? So just like 3 tablespoons of this stuff is 11 grams of fiber. So it lets you hit that quantity as well. And because it's USDA organic certified and non-GMO verified, we're not getting exposed to those synthetic biocides and rodenticides and whatever other chemicals you're using in that particular situation. So I just pour it. With that one, I just do kind of like a little bit, nothing too crazy. And then I would just mix these guys up. And you're pretty much ready to go. Now what I do, just to help manage blood sugar levels a little bit better, because there's a lot of sugar in here, is I have this as like my dessert option at the end of meals. So I have like 3 meals a day. And I would have maybe like 1/3 of this every single time. You know what I mean? And just in here alone, let's count it. Let's see. So we had the, mixed bag of seeds. That was like 5. This is another source of fiber, 6. This is another source, 7. This is another source, 8. This is another source, 9. So just in this little snack here, we have 9 different sources of fiber. So we're getting a great amount of diversity. And if I had to guess the total quantity of fiber, maybe like 15 or 20 grams, just in this little snack, But if you have like some beans, some grains, etc. during the day, you could easily hit your quotas for the day in terms of getting, 60 to 80 grams of fiber per day and the diversity of like 30 to 40 different sources per week and stuff like that. Yeah, to make it easier too, I usually have the bag, but I ran out of them today because it's already kind of the end of the week. But they also sell like a mixed bag of berries. And that's already like 3 or 4 different berry groups. So you can get that as well. to help you diversify your options much easier without even having to think about it. I like to, with fruit, especially berries, buy it most always frozen because you don't have to rush to eat them, and frozen is still very, very fresh, okay? Oftentimes it could be actually fresh than the ones that are laying out in the store because they typically freeze it on site when they're already processed, in the factory, where you have to remember with centralized agriculture, they typically pick the fruit before it ripens. The ripening process is what gives the fruit a lot of nutrition. And then there's the delayed transportation that could, last, like a week, 2 weeks, et cetera, then it's, typically transported to a warehouse, and from a warehouse to a typical grocery store. Then at the grocery store, it could sit there, for a few days. Then you pick it up and it sits in your kitchen for a few days. And by the time you eat it, it's already, who knows how old it is. It could be already weeks old. And just like, when an animal dies, it decays. The same thing when you pick up fruit from a root, or from a tree or whatever, a bush, it starts dying, it starts decaying, and it starts losing its nutritional profile. So when it's flash frozen, it helps preserve that nutritional profile at that date. So don't be worried. Flash frozen isn't like lower quality. It could actually be better quality. And again, the best part is I just don't feel like I feel rushed to have to eat these. And I think that's important because in the past I would have to throw away berries sometimes and I always felt kind of bad. Just wasting food, but also, organic berries could be kind of a little bit expensive as well, so you kind of feel bad from that vantage point too. So some things to consider, but so tasty. And it's so good for you, it keeps you very regular. And after eating stuff like this, it's like you typically don't want to return back to eating like ice cream or cheesecake, which has like a gargantuous amount of sugar, typically a gargantuous amount of saturated fat as well. That sugar feeds all the wrong bacteria in your gut and thus increasing your chances of developing digestive issues. Also, they're so calorically rich. I think one small little cheesecake, it could be like, 2,000 calories, which is super crazy. It's so tasty. And you can customize this to your needs as much as you want, you know what I mean? So it provides a lot of flexibility too. And you could eat these and not have to rely so heavily on vegetables, which a lot of people don't like, you know what I mean? And still get, the right amount of quantity of fiber, but also the right amount of diversity as well. So I hope that helps, guys. Have a good weekend and wishing you guys the best.